So another podcast I was listening to is with Mark Cuban, and he was talking about uh, like being a billionaire, and he said that no one becomes a billionaire that isn't lucky. That's what he's saying. So he said you can work your way to be a millionaire, but to make the next jump to be a billionaire, he's like there has to be some luck in there. And so to me, he was saying most people that are in that position, they know that they didn't necessarily earn that level. They maybe earned a level below that, but then they were right place, right time, and it just jumped them up into the next bracket where they're now in that billionaire category. That's what he said. And to me, the like making the NHL thing is kind of like becoming the billionaire. You can work your way to be a really good player. And then I think there's a certain amount of luck and timing that has to be lined up for you to be jumping into that next level. For example, you take a guy, even the best of the best, you take McDavid, you take Crosby, you take whoever superstar you want. Like the fact that those guys didn't have a career-ending concussion when they were 17 or didn't break their femur or whatever thing that could have happened that didn't happen to them, where you could find the next most amazing guy that was around and he got really hurt and came back and was never the same, whatever. There's an element of timing and luck even behind those guys that are the elite superstars. There's an amount of luck and timing that goes into even them making it. So my point being, it's not just the work you do. So at least that's what I believe. So for
yeah,
me,
like and you can consider luck different levels of luck.
right.
Like, but you do have to be lucky. I mean, I was listening to a podcast with Wayne Gretzky the other day and he used the word lucky so many times.
Yeah. Well, and that's even, to win, if you're going to win the Stanley Cup, if you're going to make whatever thing, if your business idea takes off, like there's a certain amount of good timing, like you brought to market an idea that was just at the right time when people needed it. And if you tried it 5 years ago, it wouldn't have worked or whatever. And so it's the same thing with hockey. And I think the reason I'm bringing that up is for parents, you can be under the illusion that you can control how it goes, especially in youth hockey when the world is still small, because you can work your way to be the best player in your area. I think that's not that difficult of a thing to do necessarily, is being the best player in your city or in your area. That is workable. You could work your way to that, I believe. When you
Yeah,
start
unless
to
you just got an ultra talented kid.
yeah, but even if you're not the ultra talented kid, like you can work your way to be one of the best players in your area just through the work you do. Like no timing, nothing. If you just put the work in, you could end up being one of the better guys in your area for sure. But once the pool starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, I think yes, you have to keep the work going and all of that for sure. But on top of the work, you have to have some timing, some luck, and some of those other things to push yourself to the higher and higher levels. And I think that's where parents need to remember that, because if you think you can control every little thing, you actually can't. So instead of freaking out and being like crazy dad, you talk about motivated parents, motivated players. Instead of being hyper motivated dad, keep in mind that there's only so much of this you can actually control. There's only so much of it that actually what you do will impact what happens. Because at a certain point, when you get to the higher levels, there's nothing else you can say, dad. There's nothing else you can do, mom. Like it's going to end up being on your kid or on circumstances that nobody has control over. So I think if you keep that kind of in the back of your mind as your kid goes through this, answering the question is like, does your kid have a chance, under the assumption like you think there's something you can do about it? Obviously you want to support their development, give them opportunities, surround them with good people, and give them every chance possible to get better and to get to the next level and to make it pro if that's what the kid's dream is and all that. But if you can just take some perspective on it and say, hey, at a certain point, I'm not going to have control over this. So maybe let's keep it in check as we're going through this, because there's only so many things that you actually will be able to do, and we see it all the time. I see it all the time, man, with parents thinking that they can meddle their way to, getting their kid into a good position. And you can in youth hockey. Like if you're enough of a pain in the ass, like you can make some extra opportunities for your kid here and there for sure. But at a certain point, it's going to run out now. And now it's just going to be up to the ability of your kid, the work that they did, plus some of these things that no one has control over. Like you can't control if your kid breaks a bone. You can't control if this team, that he was supposed to be on now can't fit him anymore and he has to go somewhere. Like there's all these things that are going to happen that you don't have any control over. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree
So
with
I think
that.
that timing thing is
Well,
can be a humbling factor when you're going through it, you know?
yeah, well, like it's that's you always be careful what you wish for, right? Like, we go through the OHL draft, right? So like I'm just saying this with my son. I could say with me when I played and stuff like that. You can say, okay, I want to do this, this, and this. It's like then in hindsight, like let's say there was these 5 teams that were like really, yeah, we really like you, and okay, I want to go there, and because you don't know. So let's just say it was Hamilton, because that was a team that really liked Charlie, and that year was the year that they won the cup, right? So if you get drafted as a high pick to them, it doesn't really matter because they're all 19-year-olds going for a cup, so you're probably not playing at all, like very little. It's just not timing is horseshit, right? Whereas you go to a team that's maybe last place, they had an early pick, and and you go there, and it's like, well, there's just more room to play. Is well, you maybe got lucky, you got to play, and you get to develop in the league, and it seems like it's quicker. But then the next year comes, and it might have been the worst thing or the best. Like, anyways, my point is, you don't know, and that's why I like to like I use the term like I don't like to tempt fate too much, like try to control fate too much. Like sometimes you're drafted or not drafted or whatever happens, and it happens, and you have to just learn how to deal with problems or the good things and figure it out. And yeah, so like, and if you were drafted to I always use that one as the Montreal Canadiens in the early 80s or the Edmonton Oilers, New York Islanders in the early 80s, well, you're probably never going to play because those 25 guys or 23 guys were the best for like 10, 12 years in that era. And those are the teams that won the Stanley Cups. And those guys are the guys on that team have 5 Stanley Cups and 4 Stanley Cups, and they're the Hall of Fame of hockey. So if you got drafted and you're a goal scoring centerman, you got drafted to the Edmonton Oilers, awesome. You think, oh, I'm going to win a Stanley Cup. It's like, no, you have to make this team now. Good luck. Are you beating out Messier? Are you beating out Gretzky? Are you beating out, the next tier of maybe Dave Lumley, the checker, or whatever? It's like, good luck.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that you just have a to hell with it attitude and wherever the cards fall, they fall, and you don't do anything to try to. That doesn't mean that either, right? Because you need everything going in your favor. Like you have to make all the right decisions that you can to try to give yourself a chance if that's what your goal is. So you want your kid to be driven. Like you don't say to your kid, well, I mean, there's a lot you can't control, so it doesn't really matter what you do. Like that's not the message, obviously. But I'm saying as a parent, when you're supposed to be in the more mature role and understanding some of this stuff, you need to be the one that helps to keep the kid level. Because I remember, like, as a kid, I was in love with hockey. I would have done anything to play anytime. Call me for any pickup game, any road hockey game, anything. I was convinced I was playing in the NHL. I was convinced I was going to get everything I wanted from hockey in terms of being a player. I was convinced of that. I was 100% sure. I wasn't 99. I was 100% sure in my head, you know, and that turned out to be wrong. And it's not. I'm not saying it's because my parents didn't warn me or anything, but there's a lot of things that I didn't have control over, and there was things I did have control over that I didn't do all I could do for sure. But there's so many things that have to happen. So as the parents watching the situation, you need to be the one that knows this stuff because the kid is going to be crazy about playing if they're crazy about playing. You know, they're going to be all about it. They're going to be wanting to do everything they can do. And for you being crazy about it also is actually not helpful. It actually could end up being harmful more than helpful. And that's what I see more often than not is the guy that has the crazy dad, the kid will fizzles out sooner than the other kids where they kind of get to play how they want to play and develop on their own track the way they want to develop, you know. Again, just like that doesn't mean you don't try to support the kid, support their development, give them chances, opportunities, get them around good people and all of that stuff. But just don't be a crazy person. You know, don't be a crazy person. You have to know that a lot of this stuff, especially if you haven't been in hockey or in the hockey world before, you don't have control, man. You don't.